What's up, YouTube? You found Hidden Trevor here. You ever pass out early for the night to find yourself waking up in a man-made prison beyond your comprehension? Every day, am I right? But no, I mean like in a literal context. Because that's exactly what happens to all the characters in everyone's favorite film franchise, Cube. Ah yes, Cube. Not to be confused with The Cube from 2013, Cubed, Cure, or other movies named after geometric shapes like sphere, circle, triangle, or the square. I kid you not, in making this video, I discovered that there's a film called Rhombus and a student film called Parallelogram. So I think all the shapes are pretty much covered. Anyway, back to Cube. Debuting in 1997, Cube is a Canadian film made by Italian-American Detroiter Vincenzo Natali that had most of its box office success come in France and is known well enough to have spawned a Japanese remake in 2021. Truly a globe-trotting franchise. Now you might be thinking to yourself, I have never heard of Cube, and I gotta say that's mostly because you're uncultured. But it might also have to do with the fact that it only made about 9 million worldwide and about 500,000 in the States. By no means a failure when you consider the budget was only about $700,000. But it was kind of a slow burn and flopped in Canadian theaters, but the film found its audience. By 1999, Cube saw a resurgence in interest at video rental stores, when those were the thing, and it got some airtime on TV on the Sci-Fi Channel. God, I miss the Sci-Fi Channel. And, like normal TV in general. I don't like the streaming service era we're in, but what can you do about it? So why has Cube garnered any relevance at all? What's the draw here? Well, I think Cube has an incredibly strong hook. For reasons unknown, 6 strangers, we'll get to that, find themselves in a labyrinth of 6-sided rooms, each wall, floor, and ceiling with a hatch leading to an adjacent cubic room. Big deal, right? Well, as demonstrated in the cold open, the rooms are booby-trapped. This becomes a running gag throughout all 4 films, in which the first person we see, in the original movie's case, Alderson, bites the dust immediately. Others wake up and manage to find each other before they die, and now they must work together to find a way out. Really solid but intriguing setup. If that sounds like it would be something that gets stale, Cube doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a tight 90 minutes, and there's plenty of interpersonal conflict to keep you entertained as a viewer. It's no wonder how Cube has gathered a cult following. So the OG Cube features characters Quentin, Ren, Levin, Worth, Dr. Holloway, Kazan, and Alderson, who's the guy who dies right away. Each character is named after a real-life prison, so there's a little creative wrinkle there. Gives you an idea of what they're kind of going for with the theming. But the initial premise also brings tons of mystery. Who built the cube? Why was it built? Why were these individuals thrown into the cube? Etc. Cube also becomes kind of a group project in that 6 people have to work together to find their way out. I do think that if this was a real life situation, I would be pretty willing to cooperate with the other people in there, no matter who they are. But, that would make for a boring movie. So, there's plenty of interpersonal conflict we get in here. Quentin, in particular, is a pretty big jerk. Outside the cube, he was a cop, so, do with that information what you will. But I remember plenty of group projects in school that were kind of ruined by the people I was assigned to be with, so, it's relatable. Cube gets a ton of credit in my mind because of how smart the characters are. Right off the bat, Ren, who is his backstory is that he's like a prison escape artist. Convenient, right? He realizes that they can throw their boot into a room by like tying their shoelaces together and using it to see if the room is booby-trapped or safe. Buttons from their jumpers can be used to scratch the metal walls and write stuff down. And they also take note of numbers listed in each doorway between the rooms, discovering that they have some significance with regard to how the cube operates. If you haven't seen Cube, I would recommend maybe, watching the movie for yourself. I think it's a really fun movie, and I would recommend it. The drama comes from seeing whether or not the characters can set aside their differences and work together to get out, if there is a way out. You could even come to the conclusion that the cube is acting as some sort of test. Maybe the cube is of extraterrestrial origin and the contestants inside are merely there for entertainment. There's so much open room to build off in future sequels. And what do you know? They made a couple. Well, okay, there's only one sequel, but let me explain. Is a movie franchise really a franchise if it doesn't suffer from sequelitis? Enter Cube 2 Hypercube. Cube 2 answers the question, what if Cube was 75% more stupid? Cube has such a simple premise, but doing the exact same thing would be boring. So how does someone one-up a movie with such a simple premise? Well, you totally overcomplicate it, of course. The dingy industrial feel of the first Cube is replaced by piercing white futuristic walls in the Hypercube. Futuristic. The original movie, directed by Natali, achieved the different colors in the rooms by sliding panels in front of the lights, and actually only used 5 colors instead of 6 because they ran out of the budget for the lighting. Hypercube says to hell with that, and every room we see is just white. I think that's kind of boring, and I do kind of see this as a metaphor for the sequel not quite having the same feel of the first. The environment is sterile and cold, giving everything a very different feel. But just like the first one, there's some people in the Hypercube. This time, there's no clever double meaning to the character names. We get Kate, Simon, Jerry, Sasha, Rebecca, Julia, Mrs. Paley, Max, a colonel guy, and someone who dies off screen. I'll be honest, none of the characters in the second film are too interesting, and all of them conceal information about themselves at first. Anyway, stupid old cubes are only 3D. A hypercube is 4D, obviously. How do you represent that in a movie? Well, they attempted to. So not only do we have poorly rendered CGI booby traps this time, we've got time paradoxes. Yeah, spatial shenanigans and esoteric illusions occurring all over the place. I mean, that's just how the fourth dimension works, people. In a lot of ways, I feel like the special effects actually take a step back in this sequel. Sure, they were ambitious, but it's glaringly obvious Hypercube came out in 2002. The wrinkle with reality itself being warped really changes the stakes quite drastically in a bad way. We see characters die and then come back to life because of the Hypercube's wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey qualities. So it's even harder to care about the characters that we get. Jerry is so annoying, in fact, that Simon just decides to kill Jerry every time he runs into him, which is many times on account of the whole time travel thing happening. Setting aside the characters, how does Cube 2 Hypercube expand on the Cube lore? Well, every character in the Hypercube is tied in some way to a company called Izon, which presumably is responsible for the creation of the Hypercube itself. Being in on shady government projects, hacking into information you weren't supposed to see, knowing someone who's involved, etc. Everyone's got some attachment to the thing. Everyone has a few bits of info about their situation. This is all very convenient from a writing standpoint. The director of the second one, his name is Andre Sekula. I don't know how to say his last name, sorry. And also, to write this film, a guy named Sean Hood helped out. They had their work cut out for him, though. The first movie already dealt with random strangers, so repeating that might not be too exciting. They decided to have this group not be so random, but in doing so, we end up getting lots of scenes with clunky exposition delivered in contrived ways, classic instances of characters withholding information because they feel like people would turn on them, and things like that. It gets old pretty quick. It also implies that this hypercube is designed to eliminate loose ends, whereas the first one was more of a test or proof of concept. It kind of felt like that. There's one character in the original cube where you might get this impression as well, but anyway, that's actually pretty interesting. But again, if everyone here is involved with the hypercube somehow, who are we supposed to be rooting for? After all, it doesn't seem the cube is being used for any good purposes, and the interpersonal drama with the characters not being very trustworthy, not trusting each other, it all falls flat mostly, because in the end they needed to solve a riddle to know how to be in the right place to escape the hypercube. So all the bits of info they had from their own personal experiences didn't really help them at all, so it feels a little unearned in a lot of ways. Our main character, Kate, is pretty smart, but, you know. Anyway. At the end, we do get to see a glimpse of the outside world from the hypercube, and we hear some shady figure say that Phase 2 is complete. How interesting. Unfortunately, we never actually get to see what Phase 3 would mean, because the next movie in the Cube series is a prequel. Enter Cube 0. Because, 0 becomes, it comes before the other numbers. It's quite genius, actually. So how would a prequel work here? Well, it doesn't really. You see, Hypercube was super highly advanced, and we're already talking about the fourth dimension here, which is hard to, depict. So going with like a sequel and making a 5D cube, what would that even look like? Instead, we go back in time. So this is the canonical first version of the cube that we get to see in Cube 0. It can't be more advanced in comparison, obviously. So what we see this time is, well, it's pretty much the same as what we get in the original Cube movie. Dingy and industrial once again. The lights even look pretty much the same. The traps are pretty standard issue as well. Better than strange and poorly rendered CGI blades flying everywhere, I suppose. But there are a new collection of people in this cube, of course. We do catch some glimpses of what appears to be a dingy hospital type setting, where all the poor prisoners were presumably drugged and processed before being placed into the cube itself. As part of that, they have some memory loss. They give them drugs so they don't remember who they are even. Now, in the original Cube movie, they remembered who they were as a person, but in Cube 0, I guess they didn't perfect that yet, so they pretty much just lose all their memories. So the characters inside the cube are very boring blank slates. Awesome. Cool. We focus less on the people inside the cube than ever, really. Instead, we focus on the losers running the cube's operations. Yeah, apparently there are some employees in charge of tracking where prisoners are in the cube and making sure the traps are functional. Way to totally demystify how the cube works. Yeah, apparently there's just some pencil pushers back there making sure the cube kills everyone that's in it. Everyone in the cube supposedly has a death sentence, and they have the choice of either, being executed or taking their chances in the cube. There's this one lady that's put into the cube, and her name is Cassandra Rains, which just sounds like an adult entertainer's name, but whatever. She was evidently not given this choice, and the employee guy named Eric is made aware of that, and he thinks that's super unfair and lame and grows a conscience all of a sudden and decides to help the blonde woman escape the cube. And let's be honest, it's mostly because he thinks she's hot. Let's make no mistake about it. In the end, he helps her escape by going into the cube himself. But the higher-ups don't like that. We also get to see who the higher-ups potentially could look like. It's some very strange-looking guy. Not as scary as you would imagine either, so that's cool. Anyway, Eric gets himself lobotomized, basically. Turns out the mentally handicapped individual from the original Cube named Kazan was probably like our protagonist in Cube Zero. Most likely a former employee of Izon or whatever company is making the cubes. And they get lobotomized and placed back into the cube for some reason. I guess to dispose of them. If you can't tell, I'm not a huge fan of Cube Zero. None of the characters are very interesting in this version. In this movie, and this version of the cube really fails to offer anything new we haven't seen. A prequel was a bad idea from the get-go. The prequel is totally unnecessary because no new information is provided. The cube is constructed. Prisoners are placed in there for obviously immoral reasons, and anyone involved that defies the powers that be, well, they get put in the cube too. It raises some questions too, like why Worth from the original cube wasn't lobotomized even though he helped build that cube, and why they would bother to throw in the other lobotomized individuals that are former employees. Because all they do is help the characters in those movies escape the cube. Because they have, they're still helpful in some ways. They're not like totally useless. Either you would just execute everyone or imprison everyone. Why would you give them the chance to go into a prison that they can escape from? Do you want someone to escape? Is it like a test or something? There's so many questions that are not really answered. And some of the questions that are answered in Cube Zero, it would have been better just keep things a mystery. And that leads us to the last entry in this series, which is a remake. It's a Japanese remake of the original film. So the characters are all wholly original, but the story beats are the same. The characters find the number codes in the hatches to each room, just like the original, and they encounter similar personal conflicts along the way as well. I won't say much about this version of Cube, which is from 2021, by the way, other than to say that it is probably the best movie in the entire series. The acting is perhaps the best in the series. I didn't really touch on the acting at all. As you can imagine, with a lower budget, not really having any stars in terms of like casting, the acting can be pretty variable at times. The original Cube is not the best acting, but it's passable. Cube 2, better acting for the most part, but some parts get ridiculous. And then Cube Zero is not the best movie. It's all around just not very good. But this remake, the Japanese remake, across the board, everything's great. The set design, the acting, it's just really well polished, and they understood what the original Cube brought to the table, which is great. It's very easy to get invested in our main guy's backstory. Yuichi Goto, that's the main guy's name. The movie even throws in a bit of a twist involving one of the characters, which differs from the original movie. Someone in the group may just be something that they don't appear to be on the onset, insinuating that the cube is indeed designed to be some sort of test. This makes more sense than whatever they were trying to do with Cube Zero. The cube allowing someone to escape in the end is not very helpful if it were intended solely to be a prison or a death trap, but even then, we do not get any answers really about the greater world of Cube. Like I said, Cube Zero demonstrated that the more you explain, the less interesting the concept becomes. Keep things mysterious. Explaining everything makes all the suspense and tension fly, well, right out the window. Is that remake the last we'll see of the Cube franchise? It's hard to say. I think there is plenty of room to make some more stories within the franchise. However, the initial premise being so simple as it is, it's hard to expound upon without completely demystifying everything. Any story that doesn't take place inside a cube becomes something else entirely, and we've pretty much seen everything we could see within the cube itself. Cube 2 makes sure of that. So it would be, it would take a masterful script to make anything worth revisiting in the series. Or not. Terrible movies get made every day, but still. The well might be completely dry here. It is a tough needle to thread to ride with the initial premise, but make it new without it being completely stupid. Like I said, you can't really do a 5D cube, right? It does look as though Lionsgate, who owns the rights to these movies, might be looking to revive the franchise soon, so we may be getting another one. And if we do, for better or worse, I will be there to see it. So those are my thoughts on Cube, giving you a little retrospective on it. It's gained some following amongst some collectors of niche media, I would say, mostly. But I think it's a good franchise that's worth watching. All of the movies are pretty easy to find on random streaming services. So I encourage you guys to take a look at them. Thank you for watching. I know I haven't uploaded anything in months, and I'm sorry about that. I will try to upload more regularly, and it will continue to be interesting topics, or topics I find interesting anyway. And I really appreciate the time you took to watch this video. So like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and thanks for watching. Also, as an aside, I mentioned the movie Cure towards the beginning just because it's one letter off from Cube. Me and my friend Sean talked about that in our podcast. I'll put the link in the description below to that channel. That's also here on YouTube, so you can listen to us talk about that movie. In general, I'm going to try and advertise my stuff more, so why not? Go take a look at that if you want to. We talk about movies pretty regularly. Recently, besides Cure, we did The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, and the other movie, The Fall. That's what it was. I was trying to think of what it was. So anyway, check those out if you want to. Thank you so much. Bye.